The Monkees was built to make audiences smile, 4 musicians, endless mischief, and a sense that nothing could ever go wrong. But time has revealed a darker aftermath. As the years passed, one cast member after another quietly disappeared, leaving fans stunned by how quickly they gone. Join us as we uncover the truth behind what happened and honor the legacies they left behind. Michael Nesmith as Mike, the serious wool hat-wearing guitarist in the Monkees, was played by Michael Nesmith. At 23 years old, his character projected calm intelligence and restraint, a counterweight to pop chaos. Off-camera, that restraint hid simmering anger at being packaged as something he never agreed to be. Born on December 30th, 1942 in Houston, Texas, Robert Michael Nesmith was raised by a single mother after his parents divorced when he was 4. His childhood was defined by instability and scarcity, frequent moves, little money, and long stretches of emotional solitude. Although his mother would later become wealthy through the invention of liquid paper, that success came after his formative years. The damage of early deprivation had already shaped his mistrust of systems and authority. On the Monkees, Nesmith fought openly against the manufactured image, once punching a hole in a hotel wall during a contract dispute that symbolized his refusal to be controlled. After leaving the group, he validated that rebellion with substance. He won a Grammy for Elephant Parts, 1981, helped pioneer the music video format, and left a lasting mark through projects like Repo Man. His private life paid the price. 3 marriages ended in divorce, worn down by absence and emotional distance. Relationships with his children were complicated, marked by guilt and worry, including a son's long struggle with addiction. Health problems emerged late but forcefully. Severe heart disease led to quadruple bypass surgery in 2018, a warning his body had been issuing for years. On December 10, 2021, Michael Nesmith died at home in California from heart failure, less than a month after his final performance. He was 78, surrounded by family, the fight finally over. His estimated $50 million net worth reflected not only Monkees' royalties, but visionary business decisions that reshaped music media. Davy Jones as Davy, the romantic heart in the Monkees, was played by Davy Jones. At just 20 years old, he stepped into the role in 1965 and carried it through the series' original run. The character was written as tender, hopeful, and endlessly approachable, and the audience instantly responded. Within months, that gentle image had fused with his real life. Born on December 30th, 1945 in Manchester, England, David Thomas Jones grew up in a cramped working-class household with 4 siblings. Poverty was constant, but grief arrived early. His mother died of lung disease when he was just 14. His father sank into depression, so Davy learned independence through necessity rather than choice. He left school young, chasing work wherever it appeared, first as a jockey's apprentice. That hunger pushed him onto the stage, and Oliver changed everything. His Artful Dodger earned a Tony Award nomination, proving his talent before television ever found him. The band sold over 75 million records worldwide, but the price was identity. Jones became the teen idol, his ambitions narrowed to a smile and a love song. Even later projects, his solo album Davy Jones, 1971, and his iconic appearance on The Brady Bunch kept him visible while leaving him creatively boxed in. Behind the scenes, his personal life fractured under pressure. 3 marriages followed the same pattern: intensity, distance, exhaustion. Touring schedules hollowed out family time, fame magnified every mistake, and loneliness grew louder with age. On February 29, 2012, after tending his horses in Florida, Davy Jones collapsed from a heart attack. He was found shortly after 8 a.m. and could not be revived. He died at 66, his passing linked to heart disease and years of accumulated stress. His ashes were returned to England and placed near his parents. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $5 million, largely from enduring Monkees royalties. proof that the boy who escaped poverty through song never truly escaped the cost of fame. Peter Tork as Peter, the wide-eyed, gentle presence in the Monkees, came to life through Peter Tork. In 1965, at just 23 years old, he stepped into the series as its most innocent figure. What audiences saw as sweetness and simplicity quickly hardened into a label he could never fully escape. Born on February 13, 1942 in Washington, D.C. as Peter Halston Thorkelson, he was raised inside an academic household shaped by constant relocation. His father's work pulled the family from Detroit to Germany, then Wisconsin, before finally settling in Connecticut. Although music was encouraged, the pressure of intellectual expectations isolated him early. By 9, he was studying piano, but the structured environment planted a quiet loneliness that never truly faded. When the Monkees exploded, selling over 75 million records worldwide, Tork found himself famous but unanchored. Once the band fractured, the fall was steep and unforgiving. Poor financial decisions, addiction and depression stripped away stability, pushing him to the edge of homelessness during the 1980s. Projects like Stranger Things Have Happened, 1994, and his blues band Shoe Suede Blues brought artistic relief but never restored what fame had taken. His personal life reflected the same fractures. 4 marriages collapsed under the weight of alcoholism, drug dependency, and emotional withdrawal. Relationships with his children grew distant, and the guilt lingered. Behind the smile fans remembered was a man burdened by self-doubt and the feeling that he had failed at the very life fame promised. In 2009, Peter Tork was diagnosed with adenoid cystic carcinoma, a rare cancer that returned with force in 2018. He died quietly on February 21, 2019, at 77, after a decade-long fight marked by resilience and fatigue. He was laid to rest privately, his estimated $2 million net worth diminished by medical costs. Rose-Marie as Millie Rudnick. Millie Rudnick, the sharp-tongued woman who cut through the chaos in the Monkees, was portrayed by Rose-Marie. In 1965, at around 43 years old, she stepped into the series carrying decades of performance already etched into her voice. Her presence felt less like a guest appearance and more like a reminder that show business had a long memory. Born on August 15, 1923, in New York City as Rose-Marie Mazzetta, she was raised inside vaudeville rather than a home. By age 3, she was already performing. By 5, she was singing on national radio as Baby Rose-Marie, and childhood quietly disappeared. Her parents pushed relentlessly, turning talent into survival, applause into obligation. While other children played, she worked, traveled, rehearsed, and learned early that love often came with conditions. Adulthood brought success but little rest. Her career stretched across 9 decades, anchored by her unforgettable role as Sally Rogers on The Dick Van Dyke Show, which earned her 3 Emmy nominations and industry respect rarely granted to women of her era. The Monkees was only one stop in a long journey that included Hollywood Squares and later voice work such as The Garfield Show. Her private life collapsed in silence. She married only once, to musician Bobby Guy, and when he died suddenly in 1964, the loss shattered her. She never remarried. Depression followed, compounded by the later death of her daughter, a wound she never publicly healed from. Insomnia and anxiety became constant companions, and work became the only way to outrun the quiet. Rose-Marie died peacefully at home on December 28, 2017, at 94, after lying down to rest and never waking again. Her estimated $5 million net worth, built from royalties and a vast entertainment legacy, stood in stark contrast to how much of herself she had given away before she ever had the chance to choose otherwise. Henry Corden as Mr. Babbitt. Mr. Babbitt, the sharp-tongued landlord who cut through the whimsy of the Monkees, was embodied by Henry Corden. When the series began in 1965, he was already 45, carrying decades of struggle into a role built on authority and irritation. That presence, brief but biting, mirrored the career he had lived long before the show. Born on January 6, 1920, in Montreal as Henry Cohen, he grew up in a Jewish immigrant family that later relocated to New York. His parents worked relentlessly, leaving little room for ease or certainty. Entering entertainment meant confronting prejudice early, and changing his name became a quiet act of necessity rather than choice. That compromise shaped a career defined by persistence instead of privilege. Corden became a familiar face, and later, a familiar voice, often cast as stern figures and antagonists. His most lasting contribution arrived when he took over as the voice of Fred Flintstone after Alan Reed's death in 1977, securing his place in animation history. Films like The Ten Commandments, 1956, added weight to his resume, but accolades never followed. Off-screen, stability remained elusive. 4 marriages, each turbulent in its own way, ended in emotional exhaustion or loss. Long working hours and financial pressure eroded family bonds, leaving distance where connection once existed. As the years passed, isolation crept in, even as his voice remained embedded in popular culture. Suffering from emphysema, Henry Corden's health declined steadily. On May 19, 2005, he died at 85 in a Sherman Oaks hospital, his wife beside him. He was buried at San Fernando Mission Cemetery, remembered more for a voice than a face. His estimated $2 million net worth closed the story of a man whose work echoed across generations, even as his name quietly faded. Bert Mustin as Butler. The butler, the frail, watchful figure drifting through the Monkees, was played by Bert Mustin. When the show began in 1965, he was already about 83 years old, quietly becoming one of the oldest working actors on television. Every appearance felt like borrowed hours. Born on February 8, 1884 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as Burton Hill Mustin, his early life was ordinary and practical. He trained as a civil engineer, worked in sales, and lived a full professional life long before Hollywood ever noticed him. Acting came late, shockingly late, only after retirement, when financial pressure forced reinvention rather than passion. His screen career began at 67, an age when most careers end. From there, he worked relentlessly, appearing in more than 350 television episodes, becoming a familiar elderly presence in American living rooms. Roles in Leave It to Beaver as Gus the Fireman and The Andy Griffith Show etched his face into pop culture, while the Monkees added another quiet notch to a resume built on endurance. Off-screen, his life was steadier than most. He married once in 1915 and remained with his wife for 54 years until her death in 1969. When she passed, the loss hollowed him. Finally, Bert Mustin died of natural causes on January 28, 1977, at 92, at a hospital in California. His estimated $1 million net worth reflected a lifetime of steady work rather than reward. A final reminder that Hollywood often remembers faces long after it forgets the lives behind them. Ron Masak as the Count. The Count, dignified, controlled, and quietly imposing in the Monkees, was played by Ron Masak. In 1965, at roughly 32 years old, he stepped into the role without spectacle, offering restraint where others leaned into chaos. It was the kind of performance that rarely screamed for attention, but lasted. Born on July 1, 1936 in Chicago, Illinois, Masak grew up in a working-class family near Comiskey Park, surrounded by routine rather than dreams. Life pressed forward through discipline, school, military service, and obligation, before ambition was allowed room to breathe. Acting arrived later, not as rebellion, but as a decision earned through patience. His career unfolded steadily. The Monkees introduced him to television audiences, but it was years later that he became widely recognized as Sheriff Mort Metzger on Murder, She Wrote, a role that brought warmth, authority, and quiet humor. Appearances on The Twilight Zone and hundreds of commercials earned him the nickname King of Commercials, a title built on endurance rather than glamour. Unlike many of his peers, Masak's private life held together. He married Kay Nabies in 1961, and together they raised 6 children, building a home that lasted more than 6 decades. While his career began later and demanded relentless work, family remained his constant, softening the strain that followed him through sets and studios. Ron Masak died of natural causes on October 20th, 2022, at 86, just days after the passing of his longtime co-star, Angela Lansbury. His estimated $1 million net worth, drawn from television, film, and advertising, reflected a life of steady contribution rather than excess. Rip Taylor, as Glick Glick, the unpredictable spark who slipped into the Monkees like controlled chaos, was portrayed by Rip Taylor. In 1965, at around 36 years old, he entered the series already carrying the nervous energy of a man who had learned to survive by being louder than his pain. What looked like comedy was, in truth, armor. And it was heavy. Born on January 13, 1931, in Washington, D.C., as Charles Elmer Taylor Jr., his childhood was marked by loss and fear. His father, a musician, died when he was 2. His mother worked as a waitress, and stability never arrived. Foster care exposed him to abuse. Humor became his shield because laughter was the only way to stay standing. On stage, he exploded. Confetti flew. The mustache became legend. He was crowned the King of Confetti, flooding shows like Hollywood Squares and The Gong Show with manic joy, sometimes appearing thousands of times across television and nightclubs. Behind the spectacle, the pressure to remain on never stopped, and silence became terrifying. His personal life remained fractured. A brief marriage to Rusty Rowe ended early, leaving no children, no anchor. He shared a long, loving relationship with Robert Fortney, but the era forced secrecy. The hiding wore him down. Rip Taylor died on October 6, 2019, at 88, after suffering congestive heart failure, following seizures that weakened him in his final days. His ashes were scattered at sea in Hawaii. An estimated $3 million net worth remained from decades of laughter, but the man beneath the confetti left quietly, finally allowed to rest without performing. Ted DeCorsia as Blackbeard, the menacing figure who loomed briefly yet unmistakably in the Monkees, was portrayed by Ted DeCorsia. In 1965, at 62 years old, he entered the series already carrying the weight of a lifetime spent playing danger. His presence felt older than the show itself. Born on September 29, 1903, in Brooklyn, New York, Edward Gildea de Corsia grew up inside the restless pulse of the city. He found his voice first in radio, carving out a career through sound alone, before the difficult leap into film forced him to compete again. He became known for cold, brutal roles in films like The Lady from Shanghai and The Killing, faces audiences feared but rarely remembered by name. He worked constantly, yet always on the margins, carrying a career defined by tension rather than triumph. His private life fractured quietly. 2 marriages ended in divorce. A daughter remained, but family stability slipped away as work consumed him. The roles demanded hardness, and over time, that hardness followed him home. Ted DeCorsia died on April 11, 1973, at 69, from cerebral thrombosis, collapsing far from the villains he once embodied. His estimated $200,000 net worth reflected decades of labor without reward. He was buried without spectacle. George Furth as Ronnie Farnsworth. Ronnie Farnsworth, nervous, awkward, and quietly exposed in the Monkees, was played by George Furth. In 1965, at 34 years old, he stepped into the role with restraint rather than bravado. It was the kind of performance that hinted at something unsettled beneath the surface. Born on December 14, 1932, in Chicago as George Schweinfurth, his upbringing was stable, educated, and structured. Yet pressure followed him early. Expectations to succeed, to choose the right path, to justify ambition. He studied at Northwestern and Columbia, but the pull between acting and writing created a lifelong tension that never fully resolved. Though he appeared in countless television roles, true recognition came behind the scenes. His work on Company earned a Tony Award, while Merrily We Roll Along exposed how fragile success could be. Fame never sat comfortably on him. Writing demanded solitude, acting demanded exposure. The conflict fed anxiety, and eventually, depression. Privately, Furth guarded himself carefully. He was openly gay only to those he trusted, shaped by an era that punished honesty. He often joked about avoiding interviews, but beneath the humor lived isolation and emotional fatigue, worsened by struggles with addiction. George Furth died on August 11, 2008, at 75 from pulmonary infection after years of quiet decline. His estimated $850,000 net worth stood as the residue of brilliance that never fully translated into security. He left behind words, characters, and music, yet carried the loneliness of someone who spent a lifetime explaining himself through art instead of life. Vincent Beck as Ivan, the ominous presence who slid into the Monkees with a predator's calm, was portrayed by Vincent Beck. In 1965, at 42 years old, he stepped into the series already known for menace, his stature and voice doing the work before he ever spoke. The role confirmed what casting directors already saw. Danger fit him too easily. Born on August 15, 1924, in Manhattan, New York, Beck grew up without the safety net most actors never realized they had. He began performing on stage early, drawn toward intensity rather than charm. The transition to film brought immediate typecasting. His deep voice and towering build locked him into villains, from the Martian leader in Santa Claus Conquers the Martians to relentless heavies across television. By the mid-1960s, his screen identity was fixed. The Monkees used that reputation knowingly, almost playfully, but Beck's career outside the show leaned darker. Films like The Spy in the Green Hat and The Bamboo Saucer continued the pattern. Authority figures, corrupt men, alien threats. Later, Vigilante, 1983, placed him as a compromised judge, a role that echoed the moral decay he had spent years portraying. The work was steady, but the range remained tight. His personal life reflected similar fracture. 2 marriages ended in divorce, and relationships with his children weakened over time. As illness advanced, distance replaced reconciliation. Cancer slowly stripped away the physical power that had defined his career, leaving a man who no longer fit the roles that once sustained him. Vincent Beck died on July 24, 1984, at 59 from cancer in Manhattan. His estimated $500,000 net worth stood in stark contrast to the number of productions he carried on his shoulders. He left behind a catalog of villains and the quiet truth that playing darkness long enough can leave very little light to return to. Len Lesser as George, the blunt, no-nonsense figure who briefly cut through the absurdity of the Monkees, was portrayed by Len Lesser. In 1965, at 44 years old, his performance carried the weight of someone who had seen far more than television comedy ever revealed. Even in a lighthearted show, there was gravity in the way he stood and spoke. Born on December 3, 1922, in the Bronx, New York, Leonard King Lesser grew up in poverty as the son of a Polish immigrant salesman. Money was scarce, expectations were high, and survival came before dreams. Exceptionally bright, he graduated from City College of New York at just 19, only to have his future interrupted almost immediately by World War II. He enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor, serving in the China-Burma-India theater. When he returned, acting became both refuge and burden. His career stretched more than 6 decades, built almost entirely on supporting roles. True fame arrived painfully late with Uncle Leo on Seinfeld. The irony was cruel. Recognition finally came when most of his life had already passed. His personal life unraveled quietly. He married actress Janice Burrell in 1954, and they had 2 children, but the marriage collapsed in 1982. The divorce left emotional scars that never fully healed. Len Lesser spent his final years battling cancer, weakened further by pneumonia. He died on February 16, 2011, at 88 in Burbank, California. His estimated $1 million net worth reflected a lifetime of steady work rather than reward. Audiences remembered the laugh lines, the catchphrases, the familiar face, but behind them was a man shaped by war, loss, and decades of being indispensable, yet invisible. Monty Landis as Mr. Zero. Mr. Zero, the recurring antagonist who stalked the Monkees with clinical persistence, was played by Monty Landis. In 1965, at 36 years old, he entered the show not once, but repeatedly, becoming a familiar threat audiences learned to expect. Consistency was the point. Fear delivered on schedule. Born on April 20, 1931, in Glasgow, Scotland, as Max Landstein, Landis grew up amid constant displacement. Immigration to the United States reshaped his life early, forcing adaptation long before adulthood. Acting followed as both opportunity and constraint, offering work but demanding emotional restraint. By the time the Monkees arrived, he had already built a career playing men defined by control rather than warmth. Beyond the series, his resume stretched quietly but steadily. He appeared in Charade, 1963, navigating the edges of suspense, and later in films like Body Double and Real Genius, often cast in roles that hovered just outside the center of the story. Television kept him visible, from Pee-wee's Big Adventure to appearances decades later on The Golden Girls. The longevity came at a cost. 2 marriages collapsed under the pressure of constant work and emotional distance. His life settled into routine rather than connection, and professional consistency replaced personal stability. Unlike stars who reinvented themselves, Landis remained anchored to the same narrow space the industry allowed him. Monty Landis died on December 14, 2024, at 93 of natural causes. His estimated $500,000 net worth reflected a lifetime of work without insulation. He was rarely the story's focus, but always the obstacle, the problem to be solved. The figure audiences remembered without ever knowing why. Time has moved on, the laughter has faded, and many of the faces that once filled the screen now live only in memory. But which story behind the Monkees surprised you the most, and whose fate hurt the deepest? If these lives moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the stories Hollywood never wanted you to remember.